I had this wonderful
You
idea.
just hear that change in the pitch of his voice? You just hear that?
We were going to do a haunted house.
Welcome to the Empowering Choices podcast. My name is Joshua.
I'm Lucas.
I'm Eric.
Lucas and Eric are licensed professional counselors, and today's episode is called Story Time with Eric. What is burning?
I think that should just be like kind of a separate little like interlude episode.
Yeah,
Although
yes.
I think, most episodes kind of get one of those anyway. So
Right. Yeah, I think we kind of do that.
Yeah.
So we were talking about an incident from your childhood that I don't think we've shared with the internet at large yet. And I was accusing you of doing things that might possibly have hurt people or property, and you firmly attested that you definitely hadn't, even when you lit your basement on fire.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
what
there was no damage to people or property in the entire escapade.
I'm going to
this.
imagine this was around Halloween. Correct me if I'm wrong.
This was definitely around Halloween. It was. So I was always kind of a very independent individual who wanted to be able to create and develop and have what it was that I was thinking that we should have.
I really like how my notes here say lit the graves in the basement on fire.
Right.
Presuming, based on the grammar,
There's a lot.
that there are graves in your basement.
Yeah, let's start there. Why? What?
Start with that. Well, then we have to roll back just a little farther. My father would buy a house, and then he would do all the renovations to the house in 5 years and sell the house, and then he would buy a new house.
But he was just like a slow pace flipper, is that?
Well,
In his
he
part-time?
was he was a master carpenter who continually wanted things to do, and 5 years is about all he needed to be able to do everything he could with that property, and so he had to sell it and get a new one.
But that wasn't like his full-time job. That was
No.
like a hobby.
No, he was a soil scientist for the government as his full-time job.
Played with dirt.
He played with dirt, and ironically, so did I. And
Right.
I just did it a little different. We happened to, in this house that he bought it, it was larger than the others, and it had a basement and had some acreage, with it. My dad was very big on gardens, and this one had a 4th-acre garden. Yeah. No, it wasn't.
Josh is like, this is wonderful. Eric's like, no, that wasn't where I was going. See, this is the conversation I have with
Right.
Eric all the time of like, you assume and then no,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not the
No.
direction he was going with that story.
No. Guess who got to weed a 4th-acre garden?
Your
Yeah.
mother.
I wish. Yeah, no, he was 5 years younger, so he didn't get to do that hard of labor out there yet. Well, and everywhere my dad went, every house that he owned, it needed to have a root cellar. It was just a part of him,
And if it didn't have one, did you start digging?
not me.
I see.
I started carrying the buckets.
I see. So this
Now,
actually
here's-
happened.
Here's where we go way back in my memory. Now, this is what I remember from a long, long time ago, as when my father was digging out the basements, and he would say, "Come
He
over
actually
here,
did
son."
this. That's awesome.
And
I didn't know this was story time with Mrs. Doubtfire.
you should be
Yes.
much more respectful than that, Sonny.
Wow.
Really hard to be serious.
Hello there. No, but my dad did. He'd say, "Go get the 5-gallon
Oh
buckets."
my gosh. And that was when you knew.
Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, this is the next 6 months. And because, when he'd come home from work, he would, go down and be working on this. The house that we moved from, he started with a coat closet.
I was just going to say, like, paint me a picture here.
Yeah.
So he finds a spot in the house
Yep.
and cuts a hole in the floor.
Cuts a hole in the
finds
floor.
the
Starts
dirt.
digging.
And finds the dirt.
And a shovel.
And goes down.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have to admire just like, no, I'm just going to start digging. I'm going to do it.
Yep.
And then he did.
Like I said, he was a master
Amazing.
carpenter.
Love it.
He could start with blueprints and do his own blueprints, and he could finish a house all the way through to the finishing trim which is really rare for one person, from what I understand as a carpenter, to be able to cover all those areas. The only thing he couldn't do is set trusses by himself.
I hear they're big.
For obvious reasons, yes. Yes. He, in fact, when in this house, because he built a whole kind of day room extension onto it, and he brought over a good friend of his who was a full-time carpenter, Kevin, and Kevin oversaw the trusses being set where they needed to set, and Kevin was up on the roof making sure those guys were doing it, what needed to be done. And that was the only time I ever saw my dad bring somebody else in. But here we are, and we're in this new house, and this new house has a nice basement, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, my digging days are over.
It already has a basement,
this
thank
is
God.
so nice.
2-story basement? Down to the level?
Yeah, it was down there, down underground. And I remember going down and looking around and thinking this and going, this will be great. And then I turned to the left and I looked and I went, oh no. Because there was already an unfinished part of the basement that was just dirt.
You could see those exposed dirt.
It was exposed. It was kind of mounding dirt. It wasn't, they had definitely not cleared it out, but it looked like, because there was a way that you could go up kind of this concrete path, and there was an outside door, so it made my dad think that that's how they passed wood down into the basement.
Interesting.
Regardless, he was going to dig all that dirt out.
It's got a basement, but it's not big enough.
Yeah. The only saving grace that I had in the whole thing is that I didn't have to dig. I just had to carry the buckets, and it used to be a cat. They just let their cats go down there, and that was their potty place. And so I'm like, I'm so glad I don't have to be digging. This is wonderful. Yeah. But what had happened is he got one side of it all dug out. And I really still to this day don't know what it was that he was going to do with those areas. I'm not even sure that he actually knew, because he had so much space and so many other things. But he got one side dug out and dug down and leveled out, and it was a dirt floor. And I had this wonderful idea.
Did you just hear that change in the pitch of his voice? Did you just hear that?
We were going to do a haunted house, because we had never, I loved
That's
Halloween.
Awesome.
I mean, I was just like, Halloween was like one of the greatest, holidays ever. And ever since I could, go out on Halloween, you get bags of candy, you'd have so much fun. You'd sneak a couple of eggs out. You'd have so much fun. You'd go to apartment places and run across the town when you heard they were giving bigger candy bars or money in other places. It was great. Loved it. But we'd never done a haunted house. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm gonna pitch this. And so I got my friends together, and I said, hey, what do you think about this?
We're not pitching it to your parents, to be clear.
Well, no, I had to have my friends on board first, because, exactly. Well, you got to have a good crew if you're going to make it happen, and
you couldn't set the trusses yourself.
Right. And whether or not they were a good crew, I have no idea how to answer that question. They're the only people I was going to ask to help man it. So I started with them, because that's what business people do. They start with, you build a crew. And they were like, oh, man, that sounds fun. It'll never happen. But okay, that was fun to talk about.
Just like the swimming pool.
Well, right. Yeah.
That's another story time with Erik episode.
Yeah. And so then I went and I pitched it to my dad. And a part of bringing my friends together was also to develop the plan. How was this going to work? Where were we going to start with people at the front gate? How were we going to lead them around?
Where were you going to collect money?
Yeah.
Right.
What kind of admission do you charge for something like that?
Exactly. And
one jawbreaker.
Yes.
I don't even remember if we charged admission.
That wasn't the juice.
I think what the whole thing was is that you came to our house and you did trick or treat, and then you got led through the haunted house as a part of getting your trick or treat. And so I had to have my parents on board with this. And
comes in handy.
Right? It kind of does, because, just as what a 10-year-old, getting them to go to the movies is going to be awfully hard on Halloween.
By the way, I just feel like if I went to someone's house today, like I did trick or treat, And they're like, "Hey, would you and your son like
wanna
to come
come down
walk
to the
inside
basement?"
of our basement?" And you're like, "No, thank you."
Well,
So
2024.
people took you up on this. They're like, "Cool."
Oh yeah, I mean,
Okay.
this was in the 70s.
It was in a different day.
Yeah, the 70s, early
Yeah.
80s.
Yeah.
So this was nothing. You didn't think anything
Yeah.
about this kind of thing, and so
From another time.
It was from
Yes.
another time.
Another time.
We worked it out to where my dad actually said, yes, you can do this. And I ran through the different things. I think I even had it written out, and I had a blueprint, of everything.
We're gonna have the skeletons here,
Right.
and
Yep. We had skeletons. We had the cobwebs. We had the different things in different areas. It was designed that there would be fishing string on, different types of, rockers or things. And some of my buddies would be in there, and they would be pulling it to move things.
very nice.
So it was going to be a real authentic type of a haunted house. And I knew that if I could get my dad on board, then I could sell it easier. So when I was talking about, okay, we're going to have rope tied to like the rocking chair, he was like, why would you do that? Now I wanted rope tied so that he would say, why would you do that? Because he'll come up with a better idea. Now he's invested.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, we need to get it to move. And he
you
goes,
knew you were lobbing
Yes.
him a half-baked
Yes.
idea so that he
Yes.
would go, that's a problem I can solve.
Yep, exactly. Yes. Well, that's my childhood right there. And then he goes, no, we've got fishing. Fishing line would be so much better because they won't see it and it'll look more authentic. I'm like, bam, I
Yep.
got it.
That was what you
got
needed.
it. And he's like, okay, so now how do they get out of the haunted house?
They don't.
Right. I said, well, here's what happens is they come through the house and then they come down the stairs, and then we guide them through the haunted house and up the little walkway chute that goes out, to the outside. And, fortunately, that was about a 3-foot high, chute. And
This wasn't a door.
this wasn't.
This was
yeah,
like
it
a
was
hole
it was
in
a
the
hole.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like a crawl space hole,
kind
for
of, but
context?
bigger. Yeah. They had a wood thing on the outside that would,
Yeah.
keep it, closed. And he goes, well, what if you have parents? I said, well, they can go around and wait for them at the other side. And I wasn't sure that was going to work, but I was like, how often do parents really going to go through? I mean, if you have like a little kid, I mean, we're shooting for the grade schoolers, and fortunately I was pretty right about that. Parents are like, yeah, I'll just wait for you on the other side. And they'd wait actually in the front yard. And so what I didn't put in the blueprint, what I did put in the blueprint is that we were going to form graves in that area in the basement that had that he had leveled out for the dirt. And so there was dirt still on the right side of it there that we could pull that over and form graves and put gravestones. And, so we had these creative rip type gravestones and these different things. What I didn't put in the blueprint is that we would be lighting them on fire.
You declined to inform your father about that part of the plan?
What's the one thing that's going to get him to say no? And what's the one coolest thing that no haunted house has ever had with live people going through it?
Open flame.
Open flame. Yeah. So,
the fire marshal has something to say about this. I think the statute of limitations has passed, so I think you're okay.
Well, I kind of figured so too, but it was only dirt we were burning, not a house. So anyhow, we get this thing through and he's okay with it. And he gives the approval. And I go back to my friends and I'm like, here's what it is. Here's what we can do. And they're like, oh my God, your dad said yes? How did you get this through? And so, my dad was really, really keen on things and you didn't get much past him. And I was surprised I even got this through. But I had to use all the right steps, levers, buttons, and things of this nature. Just showing you how I thought as a child. So when I say I was a strong-willed kid that was hard to be raised, well, here you go. And so Halloween happens. And my friends came over. We rearranged the basement. We had things, to make it look like an old, dusty house. And my dad, helped us some with that. But he also was giving us, he gave me a lot of independence. So this was my project. It was going to be.
How old were you, to be clear?
We moved over to that house when I was in the 6th grade.
You're like 11.
Somewhere like 11.
Give or take.
Yeah. And he thought that this is something I needed to see all the way through, and I could, be able to be in charge with my friends and, don't break anything, but there wasn't a lot down there that could be broken. After we'd moved, it's just kind of where stuff got, stored as basements go. And so it's happening. People come, and as a part of getting the trick or treat, we would start sending them through the basement. And I mean, we rigged this up to where, because I had probably 4 or 5 friends who were down there.
Mm-hmm.
And so
moving the rocking chair,
yelling
at people,
moving the table, the scary sounds. We had, Halloween music going on, and, all kinds of little special effects that were happening. People jumping out at the kids, and, then they would lead them up. And you could see a little bit of smoke coming out of the, the burning area, and they were moving up through there, and they're like, "What's going on?" And then they'd look, and they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, that's cool," And they're like, we even had people say, "Are people like going to come out of the mounds?" And I'm like, only if I'd have thought about it before now.
Nice.
Which is good I didn't, because the whole gasoline thing.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, that may have gone sideways.
That would have gone really sideways, but we would have tried it. Believe
It's
me.
flame retardant. I promise. Just wear the jacket. It'll be fine.
I know it looks like mayonnaise, but don't worry about it. It's flavor retardant.
Looks like mayonnaise.
Because that's probably something we would have done. So we're going through there, and we're doing this, and it's working. And then 2 of my buddies. Here's where a great plan at that age starts to go south. Because really, the flames did not make anything go south. It would have worked perfectly. And I think for the most part, my dad wouldn't have known, although one dad did go through with his kids, and he's like, "What in the world?" And he goes, "That's really cool." And he's like, "How are you doing that?" And I explained it, and he's like, "That's really creative. Does your dad know you're doing this?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah. Of course he knows."
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and the guy's like, "Okay, well, I know your dad, and he's pretty responsible. So, yeah, okay. He's probably got this well in hand."
Just open flame in the basement. Don't worry about it.
Flame. Yeah, no big deal.
Because you had what, like just gasoline poured on dirt? I mean, is that practically the situation here?
That's practically
How are
the
you doing
situation.
that? That's gas and a match.
Yeah, I think I had some on-the-spot elaborate way of explaining it that sounded pretty scientisty. And this
It's
guy,
a flame accelerant poured over,
Right.
What would it be like earth matter and
right, and just the right earth matter that doesn't do much more than smolder. It would have had something to do with my dad's vocabulary tied into it, and the guy was like, "Okay," and so then in the next time going through. My buddies got mad at each other for some reason. I don't even know. I mean, I was upstairs trying to lead people down through it, and I come down, and these guys are like upset with each other. And as they're going through it, and one person is trying to pull, their thing, and the other person's trying to pull their thing, and they're pissed off at each other, and then things start to, fly across the room at each other. And I'm trying to explain that that's just a poltergeist that, came with the place. And then they get in a fight. And it's like Dracula and Frankenstein are in a great big fight in the basement.
oh, good.
And so, we had to move quickly because the monsters need to be resettled. You know how scary movies go, Dracula and Frankenstein, they just don't get along. And so we moved through, and that had created a commotion. And then my mom comes down. She's like, "What's going on down here? What's up?" And
I heard yelling.
I think one of my friends bailed at that time. He was all pissed off. And then we're like, I'm resetting things, and, I'm taking the next group through, and I'm kind of mad at my friends. And we start to head past, to go up towards the way out, and there's my dad sitting crouching in the outer exit,
Kind of like up at the top.
and looking, and he's like, "I think you need to close the haunted house. And I'm like, oh, it's been doing great, Dad. Really? He goes, no, you're closing now.
I think you're doing it.
I'm like, crap. So now I'm in trouble. And he's like, what were you thinking? And I'm like, isn't it obvious? I wanted the coolest haunted house ever.
Isn't there? I think there's a Calvin and Hobbes comic strip where Calvin's in the middle of the living room pounding nails into the coffee table, and his mom walks in and goes, "Calvin, what are you doing?" He kind of looks at her and goes, "Is that a trick question?"
Right?
I have a hammer and there's nails.
Right? Yeah. It turns out that one dad who went through and thought it was cool and everything
Told
was
your
all
dad
right.
about how cool it was that there was flame in the basement?
Well, kind of, sort of. I mean, they were friends. So my dad just happened to be out there when he was leaving with this kid, and he just happened to comment that, man, that's the coolest thing he's ever seen down there.
Mm-hmm.
And, he gave all the credit to my dad for his genius as to being able to do that and not have it be something that would get the fire marshal's, attention, which got my dad's attention.
Like, what do you mean? That wasn't in the blueprints.
And he's like, I was smelling some kind of smoke through the vents. Now, if you ask why I might not have thought that smoke coming up through the house might have alerted anyone, it's because my dad smoked. It was the perfect cover. Only cigarette smoke
little
and
different.
Smell.
it does not smell like
Burning.
Houses burning down.
burning graves.
Burning graves.
Right.
They're a different smell and a different color, and I did recognize that. But they were going out
the hole. It was
out the
fine.
hole. It was good.
It was fine.
Everything. I only used. I really measured out just the same amount of gasoline each and every time. I mean, I knew exactly what I was doing.
Oh, so you like splashed it, lit it, and it burnt out, and then you splashed
Well,
it
no, you
again
didn't
and lit
splash it. You poured it, and you
Very
took the
carefully.
very carefully things, and you made sure that you didn't drip anything, and that the gasoline can was on the other side, where the other dirt was. Yeah, no, none of this is actually a dangerous thing waiting to explode. Oh yeah, it all is.
Right. Note to self: this is not a blueprint for your child's next.
Right. No, but it does mean, I mean, know your kids, be involved with your kids. My dad did everything right, except just come in to oversee things right in or as they were happening. But he had no clue something like this was even going to happen. And so he shut it down, and I got grounded, and, the haunted house was over, and it was a lot of fun. Even the fight was kind of fun to watch. But
How often do you see Dracula and the Frankenstein monster going at it?
right. And I'm like, is this really happening? I'm like, this is so cool. I couldn't have planned this better if I tried, because they were really going to blows. And the kids are like, how'd you get Frankenstein and Dracula to fight like that? I'm like, I got no clue, but if I knew, I'd do it again. Now let's go this way. And that was the burning down the grave story.
The thing that I think about when you were talking about like the place that your dad could have made improvements possibly is the phrase trust and verify.
Right.
Right? Like, did you do homework? Oh, of course I did. Okay, great. Let me see it.
Well, I did get my trust pulled back a bit.
I can imagine. Yeah.
But at the same time, my dad did give me time later on to be able to, expand that trust again and see, how I was doing with that. It wasn't that he didn't know he had a little Jimmy Neutron for a son. He
Right.
definitely knew that.
Or Calvin or
Calvin. Yeah, I was always unintentionally, because I wasn't intentionally trying to be destructive. I was just me. And so unintentionally, I did cause a bit of havoc at different times throughout my life. And one of the things that my dad could have done better is to build a better relationship with me. That really would have helped. He was very interested in his interests, and he didn't really like playing games or spending time with kids. I mean, liked the way he grew up was on a 5,000 acre cattle ranch. And his dad said, come on, we're going to go build a ranch house. And so he worked with his dad. He learned all these carpentry skills. It was his passion. It was his talent. He loved it. I didn't.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So the thing that your dad, like your grandpa and your dad, like they got
Right.
along and it was okay.
Yeah.
And then,
And it's not that we didn't get along.
yeah.
If you've ever seen the Indiana Jones movies
Mm-hmm.
and you see Sean Connery as the dad and you see Harrison Ford, as Indiana, and I think it was in Young Indiana where Sean Connery is inside and he's with the books and he's doing the studies and he's looking for the things, and Indiana is outside exploring the world. That was a perfect representation of our relationship. My dad was always in the books and always in the interest and always creating things. And I mean, he was a genius and he would put together things that had never been thought of before. And I was like, there's an adventure over there and there's one over there and I'll make one over there. And he's like, come help me. And I'm like, I got adventures. I got to explore this world. And so I did all kinds of things throughout the neighborhood that were just like Indiana Jones, and we had a lot of fun. But it just wasn't the connection. If my dad could have learned to like to play games, it would have helped in a whole lot of ways. He just couldn't get to that place.
Well,
So know what's going on in the basement of your home.
That's a good idea.
Could be a good
Yeah.
check the basement.
Know what's going on there.
Be
Or
suspicious with smoke smells.
do not ignore your senses when it comes to your kids.
Yeah.
Even that fifth sense that tells you,
I should be looking for something going on right now.
Yes.
But spend time with your kids. Develop that relationship because that really is going to be a huge assistance regardless of the will of your child. It matters a lot. You matter a lot. And so develop that, and that is a huge help in your parenting.
Totally. And spending time with your kids, all these different tools and things that we talk about. There's plenty more information about that you can find in our app. If you go to the App Store, search Empowering Choices Parenting, you will be able to find that and download that and get our courses, including the Fundamentals of Parenting course. So we hope you enjoyed today's Story Time with Erik, and we will see you on the next episode.